What if I told you that in 1954, a man walked through customs at Tokyo's Haneda airport carrying a passport from a country that had never existed? A country he insisted had been there for over 1,000 years, complete with a capital city, currency, and detailed history that no one else could verify. The man spoke multiple languages fluently, carried legitimate business documents, and had hotel reservations in Tokyo. Yet according to every map, every atlas, every geographical record on Earth, his homeland had never existed. This is the story of the man from Taured, a mystery that has haunted researchers for decades and challenges everything we think we know about reality itself. Tonight, we'll explore the most documented case of interdimensional travel in modern history, or perhaps the most elaborate hoax ever perpetrated. July 1954, Tokyo's Haneda Airport, the gateway to post-war Japan, where East meets West in a delicate dance of reconstruction and suspicion. The morning sun cast long shadows across the terminal as Flight 331 from Europe touched down on Japanese soil. Among the passengers disembarking was a well-dressed European man in his 30s, carrying a leather briefcase and speaking fluent Japanese to the ground crew. He approached the customs checkpoint with the confidence of a seasoned traveler, presenting his documents with a polite bow. The customs officer, following standard procedure, examined the man's passport, and that's when the impossible began. The passport appeared authentic in every way: official seals, stamps, proper formatting, high-quality paper, and binding. But the country listed was Taured, a nation that existed nowhere on Earth. The man explained, with growing irritation, that Taured was located between France and Spain, where Spain currently sits on modern maps. He insisted his homeland had existed for over 1,000 years, with its capital city of Tamanrasset and a rich cultural heritage. The customs officer called for his supervisor, who called for the airport security chief, who called for immigration officials. Within hours, what should have been a routine entry had escalated into an international incident. The man from Taured remained calm, producing additional documentation, a driver's license from Taured, business cards, and even currency from his homeland. Every document was expertly crafted, showing no signs of forgery, yet represented a country that had never existed. The man spoke Japanese, English, French, and claimed to speak Taurian, the official language of his non-existent homeland. He showed them stamps in his passport from previous trips to Japan, the United Kingdom, and other countries, all appearing legitimate. The mystery deepened when officials discovered the man had a hotel reservation at the Hotel Ryumikan in Tokyo, booked weeks in advance. He carried Japanese yen, exactly the amount a businessman would need for a several-day stay in Tokyo. The man was escorted to a secure room in the airport's administrative section, where the real investigation would begin. Lead investigator Takeshi Yamamoto, a veteran of wartime intelligence operations, had never encountered anything like this case. The man from Taured remained cooperative but increasingly frustrated, insisting that everyone else must be suffering from some form of mass amnesia. When shown a world map, he immediately pointed to the Iberian Peninsula and declared, "This is where my country should be." "Spain?" he asked, genuinely confused. "I've never heard of any country called Spain in this region." He described Taured's geography in remarkable detail: mountain ranges, rivers, major cities, and neighboring countries that didn't match any known European geography. The man spoke of Taured's history, its monarchs, its role in European politics, and its cultural traditions with the passion of a true patriot. He mentioned specific historical events that had never occurred, wars that had never been fought, and treaties that had never been signed. When asked about his business in Japan, he produced contracts with a Japanese company that investigators later discovered had no record of him. The company existed, the contracts appeared legitimate, but no one at the firm had ever heard of the man from Taured or his business. Phone calls were made to embassies across Europe, but none had any record of a country called Taured or diplomatic relations with such a nation. The Bank of Taured, mentioned on the man's business cards, was supposedly located in London, but no such institution existed. As the investigation deepened, the quality of the man's documentation became increasingly mysterious. Document experts examined the passport under microscopes, testing the paper, ink, and binding materials for any signs of forgery. The paper was consistent with official European passport stock, the ink matched government specifications, and the binding showed appropriate wear for a document several years old. The stamps and seals showed no signs of tampering, with the proper metallic sheen and depth that would be impossible to fake with 1950s technology. Handwriting analysis revealed that all the signatures and notations in the passport were made by different people, suggesting a legitimate bureaucratic process. The man's fingerprints were taken and checked against international databases, but no matches were found anywhere in the world. Even more puzzling, the man seemed genuinely surprised and confused by the technology and procedures being used to investigate him. His clothing was examined and found to be of European manufacture, but with subtle differences in fabric and construction that experts couldn't identify. The currency he carried was expertly designed, with intricate engravings and security features that would have been extremely expensive to forge. Linguistic experts were brought in to analyze the supposed Taurian language, but found it to be internally consistent and grammatically complex. The man could write in Taurian script fluently, creating documents that followed consistent linguistic patterns and showed no signs of improvisation. As word of the incident spread through government channels, theories began to emerge about the man's true identity and origin. The first theory was espionage, and, quote, that the man was a highly trained spy using an elaborate cover story to infiltrate Japan. But intelligence experts couldn't identify any strategic advantage to such an elaborate deception, and the man's behavior didn't match any known spy protocols. The second theory was mental illness, that the man was suffering from an elaborate delusion and had somehow acquired forged documents. However, psychiatric evaluation revealed a completely rational, intelligent individual with no signs of mental illness or delusional thinking. The third theory was that this was an elaborate hoax, possibly orchestrated by a foreign government to test Japanese security procedures. But investigators couldn't identify any motive for such a complex and expensive operation, especially given the minimal information gathered. A fourth theory emerged from the scientific community, that the man might be from a parallel universe or alternate timeline. This theory, while seemingly impossible, was the only one that could explain the consistency and authenticity of all the man's documentation. Professor Hiroshi Tanaka from Tokyo University suggested that quantum mechanics might allow for dimensional slippage between parallel realities. The theory proposed that the man had somehow crossed from a reality where Taured existed to our reality where it didn't. The incident occurred during the height of Cold War tensions, when international travel was heavily monitored and documented. Japan in 1954 was still under American occupation, with every international arrival scrutinized for potential security threats. The fact that such an elaborate mystery could emerge during this period of heightened security made the case even more significant. Document forgery was a serious concern, with both Eastern and Western intelligence agencies known to create sophisticated false identities. However, the resources required to create the man's documentation would have exceeded the capabilities of most intelligence agencies. The geopolitical implications were staggering. If the man was genuine, it suggested that reality itself might be far more complex than anyone imagined. American intelligence was quietly briefed on the case, but no official action was taken, suggesting either disbelief or classification at the highest levels. The Soviet Union was also believed to have been informed, though their response remains unknown to this day. The investigation took a dramatic turn when officials decided to examine the man's hotel reservation at the Hotel Ryumaken. The reservation had been made weeks in advance, with a deposit paid by bank transfer from the London branch of the Bank of Taured. Bank records in London showed no trace of the transaction, despite the hotel's clear documentation of received payment. The hotel staff remembered taking the reservation over the telephone, describing the caller as polite and speaking accented English. Phone records from the time period showed no international calls to the hotel from the supposed Bank of Taured. The money used to secure the reservation had physically arrived at the hotel, yet no banking institution admitted to sending it. Even more mysteriously, the man's luggage had arrived at the hotel 2 days before his flight landed in Japan. The luggage contained clothing, personal items, and business documents, all consistent with a legitimate business traveler. Hotel staff described the luggage as arriving via diplomatic courier, though no embassy claimed responsibility for the delivery. After 3 days of interrogation and investigation, officials made a decision that would haunt the case forever. The man from Taured was to be held overnight in airport detention, while arrangements were made to repatriate him to his country of origin. But there was no country of origin to return him to, creating an impossible bureaucratic situation. The man was placed in a secure room with 2 guards posted outside, while officials debated what to do with him. His passport and documents were locked in a secure safe in the immigration office, with multiple officials having access to the combination. The next morning, when officials arrived to continue the investigation, they made a discovery that defied all logical explanation. The man from Taured had vanished from his locked room, leaving no trace of how he had escaped. The guards swore they had remained at their posts all night, and security logs showed no one entering or leaving the area. Even more impossibly, when officials opened the safe containing the man's documents, they found it completely empty. Every document, every piece of evidence, every proof of the man's existence had vanished without a trace. The hotel reservation had been cancelled, the luggage had disappeared, and even the staff's memories of the incident began to fade. Within weeks of the incident, a strange amnesia seemed to settle over everyone involved in the case. Official reports were classified, witnesses were transferred to other duties, and the case files were sealed indefinitely. The few journalists who had heard rumors of the incident found themselves unable to verify any details or locate witnesses. Government officials who had been directly involved claimed to have no memory of the case when questioned years later. The Hotel Ryumaken's records from that period were reportedly destroyed in a routine cleaning of old files. Some researchers believe this was evidence of a government cover-up designed to hide the truth about interdimensional travel. Others suggest that the amnesia was a natural consequence of the dimensional shift itself, affecting everyone who had contact with the man. The few physical traces of the incident that remained were reportedly stored in a secret government facility. The scientific community's response to the Taured incident was divided between skepticism and fascination. Dr. Hugh Everett III, who would later develop the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, reportedly studied the case in detail. The many worlds theory suggests that every quantum event creates a branching of reality, resulting in infinite parallel universes. In one of these parallel universes, the theory suggests European geography developed differently, with Taured existing instead of Spain. The man from Taured may have been a victim of quantum tunneling, slipping through the barriers between these parallel realities. This would explain why his documentation was completely authentic. It was real, just from a different version of reality. The fact that he vanished along with all evidence suggests that he may have slipped back to his original reality. Quantum physicists have since identified several theoretical mechanisms that could allow for such dimensional travel. The energy requirements would be enormous, suggesting that such events would be extremely rare and largely random. The Taured incident shares striking similarities with the phenomenon later known as the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect describes situations where large groups of people remember things differently from how they actually occurred. Some researchers suggest that these memory discrepancies are evidence of reality shifts, similar to what the man from Taured experienced. The case of Berenstein versus Berenstein Bears is one of the most famous examples, with millions of people remembering the wrong spelling. Geographic Mandela effects are particularly relevant to the Taured case, such as the location of Australia or the size of Greenland. These effects suggest that our reality may be more fluid than we believe, with occasional bleed-through from parallel timelines. The man from Taured may have been experiencing a permanent version of what others experience as temporary memory shifts. The Taured incident is not unique in the annals of mysterious disappearances and impossible documentation. In 1851, a man named Jofar Vorin appeared in a German village, claiming to be from the country of Laxaria in the continent of Sacria. Vorin spoke an unknown language and described a geography that matched no known continent, similar to the Taured case. The case of Caspar Hauser in 1828 involved a young man who appeared in Nuremberg with no memory of his past and strange knowledge. More recently, the case of Carol Chase McElhaney in 2006 involved a woman who appeared with identification from a state that didn't exist. The phantom time hypothesis suggests that 297 years of history, 614 to 911 AD, never actually occurred, indicating massive reality shifts. These cases suggest that reality shifts may be more common than we believe, with most incidents simply being ignored or forgotten. The secretive nature of the Taured investigation has fueled decades of conspiracy theories about government knowledge of parallel dimensions. Some researchers believe that governments have been aware of dimensional travelers for centuries, quietly intercepting and relocating them. The Philadelphia experiment of 1943 allegedly involved the U.S. Navy experimenting with interdimensional travel and teleportation. Project Pegasus is claimed to be a secret government program for time travel and dimensional exploration, active from the 1960s to the 1980s. The Montauk Project allegedly involved experiments in time travel, consciousness manipulation, and interdimensional communication. Some witnesses claim to have seen government agents collecting dimensional travelers and erasing all evidence of their existence. The rapid classification of the Taured Case and the subsequent amnesia of witnesses fits the pattern of other alleged cover-ups. Skeptics have proposed various psychological explanations for the Taured incident, though none fully account for all the evidence. Dissociative identity disorder could theoretically cause someone to create an elaborate false identity, complete with detailed backstory. However, creating authentic-looking documents would require skills and resources far beyond those of a mentally ill individual. False memory syndrome could explain why the man genuinely believed in his non-existent homeland, but not the physical evidence. Mass hysteria might explain why multiple officials became convinced of the man's story, but not the documented evidence. The phenomenon of confabulation, where people create false memories to fill gaps in their recollection, could play a role. However, none of these psychological explanations can account for the physical disappearance of the man and all his documentation. Some researchers have proposed that the man from Taured was not from a parallel universe, but from a different time period entirely. The theory suggests that he may have been from a future timeline where European history developed differently. Time travel paradoxes could explain why his presence in 1954 created such confusion and instability in the timeline. The man's advanced knowledge of languages and cultures could indicate he was from a time when these differences had been resolved. His calm demeanor and expectation that officials would recognize Taured suggests he was unprepared for the historical differences. The sudden disappearance could represent a temporal correction, where the timeline repaired itself by removing the anomaly.